Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us at the Future of Work Iconic webinar series. I am Emma, the Sales Team Manager here at Iconic Offices, and we are delighted to welcome you today for the discussion of the impact of COVID-19 on Ireland's corporate ecosystem. As Dublin's working world continues to see the impact of COVID-19, we have launched Iconic webinar series to bring together a roundtable of industry experts from the commercial real estate, flexible workspace, government and local bodies for real-time, informative and dynamic conversations. We will be speaking to the experts on the ground to discuss the practical implications for the industry and for the businesses right now, providing some reassurance during these uncertain times. Before we get started, I would like to say a huge thank you to our panelists joining us from CBRE, Enterprise Ireland, Small Firms Association and IDA Ireland. We hope that you benefit from today's session and feel free to join in on the Q&A at the end. Thank you.
Thanks, Emma. And can I just apologise? First of all, we had some technical difficulties, and as we've all kind of got used to them over the last few months, I hope you didn't mind waiting just a few extra minutes. They're now all now resolved, thankfully. So can I just say what a privilege it is to be back in an office, in such a fashionable office as well, here in Iconic, the Masonry building, and getting some great inspo for, I guess, my new apartment and how I could decorate it, but I don't think I could pull it off. So good afternoon to you all, and thanks for joining us. I'm Paul Curley of IDA Ireland, and I'm delighted to be joined here today by an expert panel. To my right, Marie Hunt, Executive Director, Head of Research at CBRE Ireland. In the centre, Sven Spollen-Behrens, Director of Small Firms Association, and to my left, Mark Crystal, Manager of the Regions and Entrepreneurship Division at Enterprise Ireland. So, Thursday, March 12th, 2020, a day many of us will never forget. Our former Taoiseach, current Taoiseach in Washington, speaking to us about COVID-19. Many of us left our offices and haven't been back. As Yeats once used these 4 words, all changed utterly. So over the next hour, together we will be exploring how Ireland's commercial property market has experienced a lost quarter as a direct result of COVID-19, how the market is slowly starting to emerge from what has been an unprecedented period for the global economy, and we will all be discussing the roadmap to recovery and the COVID-19 supports enabling businesses and SMEs to get back to some sort of semblance and normal trading over the coming months. So, over the next hour, whether you're listening at home intently or eating your lunch at your desk, al desco, we'll look to pose some questions to the panel that can help answer what we're looking to speak about today. So, Marie, I might start with you. The figures for Q2, the CBRE report, and apologies, my tech has just gone down there. So, spoke to essentially what was a lost quarter for property here in Ireland. You know, coming out of that, do you see, I guess, a rebound, or how is the market responding as we're starting to enter Q3?
Well, I think I'd start with Q1 because we have had a couple of phenomenal years in terms of office take-up in this city, and I think Q1 was a phenomenal quarter. So if we look at the figures for the first half of the year, you don't see how awful Q2 was because 90% of the activity happened in the first quarter. And the likelihood was that Q2 was going to be as strong, and then COVID hit. And I think a lot of companies had bigger things to be worrying about. So all of a sudden they went from worrying about where they were going to relocate or expand and looking at buildings to worrying about their core businesses and trying to facilitate their staff for working remotely. So a lot of decision making was put on hold, and that then fed into a disastrous Q2, the lowest level of take-up that we've ever seen in the Dublin market. Now, having said that, there was quite a few bigger deals that were underway that just didn't sign in Q2 and they fell into July and August instead. So the likelihood is Q3 will be better. But it's probably not surprising to see this level of decline in activity just because companies have put decisions on hold for now. And obviously, as you know, from the IDA, we haven't had tours coming through. We haven't had occupiers visiting buildings. So there has been a lag effect in terms of decisions being made, not just in Ireland, but from multinational perspective from the US. And I suppose to some degree that might happen in a presidential year anyway, but that's the situation we're in. So we've had an awful Q2, but the expectation is Q3 and Q4 will be somewhat better.
That's good to hear. And just in terms of, I guess, Dublin, where is it currently stacking up against, other European cities during this time? Is it similar trends or?
Yeah, I think it's comforting when you look, and CBRE obviously have offices worldwide. It's very comforting to talk to colleagues in other offices because they're all experiencing the exact same thing. And when we do survey work, but we tend to aggregate results, and we're seeing the exact same results happening, albeit some of what we're seeing in Asia is happening before it's happening here because they're that little bit ahead of us in the curve. And that's been hugely helpful as well, just to get some insight from them in terms of what they were seeing when they went back to the office and what they experienced, because we're then able to use that information and roll that out locally.
Okay, that's very interesting. And just in terms, I guess, of the current crisis, we had one nearly about 10, 12 years ago. Compared to other cyclical downturns that you've experienced in your career, to what extent has this crisis accentuated structural trends that were happening anyway?
I think it's very much accentuated. Like if you look at the retail sector in terms of the move towards online, if you look at offices, the move to remote working, these were things that were happening anyway. And COVID has just kind of fast-tracked that to some degree. Property, certainly the commercial property market tends to work in about a 10-year time frame. So if you look at the pattern, it's typically dramatic peaks and troughs, and everyone is driven by a slightly different thing. But in many respects, we're in a better position going into this one. We're not as heavily reliant on debt as we were in the last cycle. The supply scenario is radically different. So yes, we will see an impact, but it's not going to be anywhere near as dramatic as what we saw in the global financial crisis, where the entire downturn was very much led by a property decline.
Okay, that's good to hear. Sven, I might put that to you. I guess you're working with small businesses under 50 employees. How does the current crisis compare for them or for you, just in terms of a downturn and the challenges that they're facing?
Thanks, Paul. Obviously, it's a very tough time out there for small businesses. The main difference being compared to the previous crisis is that we went into this crisis in a really strong position. The economy was doing well, the small business community was doing well, there was consumer confidence in the market, and there was cash in the market. And obviously, when you mentioned the 12th of March, it happened so quickly. So it was something that really, like somebody flicked off the light switch, like here this morning, trying to get the webinar going. So, and in a way, it hopefully is going to be like this again when we turn on the light switch again. But we'll see, and lots of economists talk about a K-shaped recovery now. So as an economist myself, and this wasn't what we got taught back in the day, but obviously there's businesses that are doing well, that are trading well through the crisis. I'd say around 5% of small business in general are really experiencing a strong economy, strong demand for their services, for their products. There's the type of businesses that are getting on okay, that still have a market, but they still see that their customers, their client base is being impacted. And then we have a whole cohort of small businesses that are really suffering badly, depending on the sector you're in. We're talking about certain types of retail, hospitality, tourism industry really strongly impacted, and all of these businesses need our help.
Thanks. And to yourself, Mark, and maybe if you might just touch, I know you cover regions with Enterprise Ireland, just in terms of how the regions are maybe getting on at the minute.
I think, Paul, there's what the crisis has kind of shown us, I think, is the, and Marie and Sven have talked about this already, is like what happened and what we experienced was, and what made this a little bit different, I suppose, was how quickly it happened. But I think on the other side of it, we were starting with a very strong cohort of companies who have had a number of successful years behind them. So. And what we've experienced here in Dublin has been a kind of a similar position nationally around the country. So we are seeing clearly sectors that have been challenged: hospitality, retail, any companies that are trading in those sectors. Clearly, there have been significant challenges. But we're seeing many other companies in many other sectors who have been very innovative in terms of their products and services, developing new markets, expanding their sales on the domestic market here, as well as looking internationally. And that's been this was experienced from companies right the way across around the country. So yes, this was a national challenge. It's been a global challenge. And I would say that there's no region unaffected or not impacted or insulated from the impact of COVID. But I think if we look at the overall performance of the enterprise base and where we're at, there are definitely some positive signs.
That's good to hear. And leading into this, Enterprise Ireland was on a fantastic run, and all your clients, generally speaking, were all hitting it out of the water. So that's great to hear. Probably. Would I be right in saying some strength built up because of planning for Brexit and having that Enterprise Ireland working with clients to plan for new markets?
Yeah, absolutely. Like last year, we record job numbers, record exports across the Indigenous SME base, as well as a very, very strong performance from micro enterprise as well. So it's true. I think Brexit, which was kind of dominated all of the agenda last year, led a lot of companies to kind of spend time planning, spend time looking at their markets, their customers, and securing their supply where that was an issue. But also, I think, spent a lot of time looking at the financial management and their financial position, and a lot of companies strengthened that. And I suppose that's the big issue, and I suppose the big challenge and advice we've been giving to companies over the last couple of months is companies need a financial plan. It's absolutely critical at this point, and there are plenty of supports that are available. Maybe we can talk about them in a few minutes' time. But having a financial plan, securing the necessary funding and support is really critical. And a lot of companies had done that in preparation for and consideration around Brexit, and those companies have been well served by those actions.
That's great to hear. So we might get a bit of crowd involvement here. So any of you who've been watching Who Wants to Be a Millionaire over the last few weeks, you might get your fingers on the keyboard at this time. So feel free to send in what you think the answer to this question is. So I might start with you, Marie. The recent experience has led many of us to work from home. How do you see home and remote working developing?
I think we're probably moving towards a scenario where we're going to have a more blended scenario. We've just done a survey of 10,000 people in 18 different countries, occupiers of buildings, and just looking at the results this morning, 85% say that remote work is here to stay, but then 60% say the office is here to stay. So I think it's a blend of both. I don't think there's any of us that want to work 100% remotely or 100% in the office ever again. So that the vast majority are somewhere in the middle, and it's probably going to be a 2-day in the office or 3-day in the office scenario. So it's very much a blend. And again, that would be consistent with what we're seeing in every country. And again, this is probably something that was happening anyway. And there was some companies that were reluctant to allow it to happen, but they were forced into it, and they've seen the light that, productivity doesn't really suffer. So I would definitely think it's probably a blend of both is what we're looking at going forward.
I might put that to yourself, Sven.
Yeah, this time last year, we finished our roadshow together with this big multinational company, telecommunication company, starting with a V, where we tried to promote remote working based on the findings that only 1/3 of small businesses actively promoted and encouraged their staff to use remote working as a way of working. And interesting to see, obviously, how with technology and obviously with the current circumstances, this has really accelerated. And obviously, the default position is now to work from home. And what we also see now is that obviously, while at the beginning it was a mandated stay-at-home policy where we needed to make do. Basically, we see now small businesses looking at the remote working policies, starting sending proper office chairs and proper office equipment back to back to their staff. But I think it's really important that we see this as something temporary, where we embrace the new, but also remember it's really important to be back in the office. So the hybrid aspect of this, on the one hand, to maintain the flexibility, but on the other hand, to really see the responsibility of the business community go back to the office. Because with being back in the office, there's such an ecosystem of small businesses that depends on us being in the office, from the coffee that we grab in the morning, the sandwich, the healthy or unhealthy option we take at lunchtime, to doing the shopping on the way home. It's really important to not to be back to normal, but really take the learnings from being flexible, but also seeing how important it is really for the rest of the economy to be at least partially back in the office.
And having lived on Bagot Street, close to LinkedIn and all the office environment around there, you could see the effect it was having on those small businesses, and they were really having to try and attract through new ways, I guess, customers. I'll ask the same question to yourself, Mark, but I might just add something onto it. I was speaking to a head of HR with a software company recently, and they said to me they want to get their staff back in because it's important that they learn off each other, and maybe that has been lost. Is there a potential with remote working that companies, who may have sales staff together or need to work together, that could be lost?
Yeah, I think it's a fair comment or a fair question. I think it's case by case. I think it depends on companies, their culture, how they work, etc. But yeah, and from my own experience, having been a HR manager in a past life, and focused on that area of culture, which is such an important part of organizations. I think it's something that organizations will need to reflect on, and companies will need to reflect on, is to say, well, if they're moving towards a blended approach, or if they're going to continue with remote working and home working, well, what impact will it have on team working, on the connectedness, on people's buy-in, I suppose, and engagement with the companies. A bit like, it's interesting. I think this is a really interesting area, because pre-COVID, we were looking at this area of remote working. It was something we had spent a bit of time on, particularly from a regional perspective. And one of the things that kind of constantly kind of arose was this question about skills and talent, and encouraging people, saying they wanted flexibility, they wanted remote working, they wanted home working, and as a way, if you like, we were encouraging it from the point of view of companies retaining that talent within their business. So I think there is no question things will have changed. I think I agree. I think a lot of organizations and companies will work towards blended approach. I think there's a really interesting discussion around the home working versus remote working. And it's something that I think they're two very different things. But I think, again, we need to make sure we have options for companies in that respect. And it's something we're quite involved in, around with working with community enterprise centres and hubs, both public hubs and privately funded hubs, to ensure that there are options for companies, that if they have employees who don't want to come into the office all of the time, that there might be a workspace that's available to those companies that they can avail for people close to home. So it's kind of that another option, as opposed to just the home working and our office working. There's a third option, which is remote working. So I think for sure there's I think what the experience we've all had over the last 6 months is going to raise some really interesting questions. Yeah.
I think it's important to say as well that, not everybody can work from home, like whatever their situation with kids or elderly parents, or just maybe sharing a house or an apartment and don't necessarily have the space to work from home. So we have to facilitate those people as well. And 3 words that came out of the survey we did was, it's connection, community, and collaboration. They're the three C's that you're missing if you're working remote. So really important to get people back, particularly the millennial generation, because they thrive on that sort of collaboration.
Yeah, I have to say, and I probably have some colleagues watching, I love working with them. I love going to the office. I love learning off them. And we have a saying in IDA, every day is a learning day. So I think it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. I think there'll be tailored solutions for different companies. But again, this will all work itself out over the coming months. And I just, before we switch over to, I guess, resetting and the recovery, I just might ask one last question to yourself, Marie. I seen a comment from Patrick Collison of Stripe in an interview with The Information last week, where he said, if you were to visit Stripe in 3 years, if you spend a day at our office, I don't think you would necessarily know by physical observation that COVID had happened. Is that music to the property sector's ears, or is it, okay, these companies are potentially looking at 3 years down the line?
Yeah. I think it mirrors what we're expecting will happen, that when we look back on this in time, it will be a blip. But I think it's easier for a company like Stripe, which are a new startup and obviously in modern buildings, they're able to adapt. Yep. I think if we go into a traditional older office building in 3 years' time, it will be different, because the configuration of the building, the design, even the materials that you're using will be radically different to what went before. And you're going to see the next iteration of buildings that come through with, touchless technology will certainly be there, COVID or no COVID. So I think there'll be legacy issues that will come about as a result of COVID. But what I'm not clear on is whether we will go back to the days of hot desking and non-assigned seating, because right now it's very hard to imagine that where we're at in the cycle. But 3 or 4 years down the line, if a cure has been found, we just don't know what that'll look like. But I think he's right. Yeah. We probably won't notice.
Thanks a million, Marie. I might switch now towards, I guess, Mark, what impact has the crisis had on small Irish companies from an Enterprise Ireland perspective?
Yeah, I suppose it kind of goes back to the opening comments. I think the opening part of the conversation. It's been mixed, and I think we need to recognise that. This hasn't had. We have seen some companies who are doing very, very well. Have pivoted, have changed their business model, or have retained the business that they have, and we need to recognise that and constantly remind ourselves of that. But clearly, there are some companies who are experiencing and probably will experience in the foreseeable future many challenges. A big part of it, I think, is, as I said at the start, and where we feel it's really important to start is with the funding and finance, because what's critical for SMEs is that they have the money and the liquidity that they need to run their business. So our own supports have been very much targeted at that, and we have in particular focused on the Sustaining Enterprise Fund, which is a new fund which is available to SME companies and to companies who are either manufacturing, internationally traded services companies, where they can get a grant of up to a non-repayable grant of up to €200,000. And like I suppose the message for us is, whether you're a client of Enterprise Ireland or whether you're a client of the local enterprise office or whoever your support agency is, make contact with them, find out what supports are available, find out what the challenges that obviously you have in your business, and to see what can be provided to you. So there are a lot of supports out there. I think it has been probably one of the striking features of the crisis has been the response and the range of supports that are available, whether it's through government and the wage subsidy scheme or the other payments, or to the agencies like ourselves. I think it really encourage companies to knock on the door and see what's there.
Oh yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head there. Sven, I guess retail and hospitality and many other small businesses are the heartbeat of villages, towns and cities across this country. What can each one of us be doing to, I guess, help these small businesses get through this current health and economic crisis?
I suppose, Paul, there's two things that come to mind immediately. One is us as consumers. And if you look at statistics, I don't know how many billion of cash has been built up in savings over the last months, is to really look at your own consumer confidence and your responsibility to support small businesses, business in general, all over this country. And we did this little exercise as part of a Shop Local campaign that we support, Champion Green. If every adult in this country spent an extra €20 per week over the next 12 weeks, that would equal nearly €1 billion of cash injected into the local economy. And to paraphrase, every little really helps. So this is something really, and also if you've been to the supermarkets recently, you can see the Christmas decorations are out there, and Christmas will start early this year because the small businesses in Ireland really need your support, And logistically, you really have to make sure that you won't disappoint your children because you left it too late. And we experience shortages or longer delivery times. So we have to be mindful of that. So there's something that we can do, each and every one of us as a consumer. And secondly, I touched on this as members of the office community. And we were delighted to see that in the Living with COVID roadmap that was published this week, there was signs that government is going to be more open to changing the default position working from home, because we saw that in particular for phase 2, that important meetings in the office can be held, that you can come back to the office for inductions and training purposes. That wasn't there before. And we really need to make use of it. Obviously, in Dublin, we're at stage 2.5 at the moment. We're expecting some news probably today as well. But I think as a business community, an office-based business community, we have to be a bit more vocal about the importance of going back to the office. Because as I said before, once we're back to the office, we're supporting the whole ecosystem of small businesses that depend on us as well. And it's not only the shops, it's not only the coffee shops, it's not only the sandwich bars, it's also, you know, the deliveries, the paper, the other office auxiliaries that depend on us. And this is why we really, as a business community, have to be more vocal about going back to the office and make use of the infrastructure that we have.
So if you can, if you haven't ordered lunch yet, maybe get on Deliveroo and support your local restaurant and get something in for lunch. But it's definitely something that I think for all of us, and it's something that's maybe not being taught about, the office community, getting back out there, spending again. So when we get back to the office, making sure we are supporting these businesses, because it makes such a difference having a great environment around you and bringing you in each day. So there's fantastic points, Sven.
Paul, but if I may, so because there's some multinationals as well saying, we won't be going back to the office until March next year. So we really have to be careful with this and really just have to see, is it really necessary that we have these drastic steps, or can we have a smaller percentage of the office base coming back earlier than this? So this is really going back. This is something that all of us can do.
Okay, thanks, Sven. And for yourself and Mark, I guess, what can business owners and managers do, and where can they turn for support at the minute?
Ring Sven in the Small Firms Association. No, like I mentioned this earlier on. I think the range of supports are quite extensive, and in fact, in probably one of the challenges is for companies, small companies, to kind of wade through that kind of, I suppose, is a challenge. And in ourselves and in Enterprise Ireland, I suppose we're all the time trying to look to see, can we streamline it, can we make it easier. But whether it's support to ourselves, if you're an Enterprise Ireland client, if you're a local enterprise office client, and there are local enterprise offices in every region and every county in Ireland, and our own regional office network, it's really about, you know, using the websites but also picking up the phone and there are people there who would be glad to have a chat to you, and probably a virtual meeting at this stage. And it's, as I said, there's a wide range of supports, and really the key focus of that is about whether it is funding or finance. Okay, there are those supports, but there are also supports that extend beyond that. So whether it's about looking for a bit of mentoring, whether it's around if you're looking at developing new products and services, if you're looking at a new market, a new export market, well then ourselves in Enterprise Ireland won't be too keen to talk to you. Or if it's about kind of can you kind of be more productive or maybe be more competitive, and is there something you can do in that space? So there are many supports available, and I suppose key message from us, Paul, is to avail of them and to see what's right for your business.
And can I just say, I was driving in today and was listening to the radio, and there was a bit of advice. Don't always go to Amazon. You know, look for your local company. And I'm sure, and I know, because I used to be on the other side of the house with Enterprise Ireland back in the day, the value of the trading online vouchers. Yeah. You know, for businesses to get their online presence, to develop that at the minute. And if there's anybody listening, I'd encourage them to use mentors as well. may not be a financial support that Enterprise Ireland looks to give, although it does cost. But it is an incredibly valuable support to have that person maybe who's from outside your network base that challenges you, that maybe asks you questions you're not thinking about, and that doesn't have that buy-in that other people who are around you all the time may have in your personal business.
Absolutely.
Sven, you quickly hand pass that there to Mark. If companies are coming into SFA at the minute, what supports are you looking to give them, or what are they asking for, and how are you assisting them along their journey?
So Mark was also very quick at pointing back at me. So, but no, just to say, there's three things to look at. So one is obviously, and Mark explained it really well. There's plenty of support out there. So, and the advice is really to apply for everything and anything. And if you don't know where to start, but obviously the Enterprise Ireland website is a good place. But also the Department of Business, Enterprise and Innovation, dbei.gov.ie has a complete overview of everything that is available, from Enterprise Ireland supports to the new loans that are available, down to specific sector supports and regional supports. It's really an important tool to have and to know. It's really important to know where to go to. The second thing, and it's really important, and Mark, you've talked about the aspect of liquidity and small businesses to have access to cash. And it's really heartening to see that the pillar banks are now getting behind the government-backed loan schemes. And we didn't see this in previous crises. So banks like I'm not going to name any, but you see ads, you can hear in the papers, you can see them in the news. So they're getting behind this because they really see that with the credit guarantee scheme, with the SBCI COVID working capital scheme, it's really important to bring this into the small business community. So access to cash and availing of those loans is really important.
Paul, if I could just as Sven was talking there, one thing popped into my mind, and we mentioned it earlier on, Brexit. It's really, really important, and I suppose that companies continue, or if they haven't started, start now, just considering the impacts of what this could have, whether it's through your supply chain, whether it's additional regulation, whether it's dealing with customs, whether it's getting your product into market. It's just really, really important that companies again take the time to look at all those issues. Again, there are supports available, and we're really encouraging people to look at that. And it's something that I think that you can start really early enough in terms of level of preparedness. And I suppose what our message has been and will continue to be, I think, is we've got to prepare for the worst. And if it's not quite as bad as we see it, well then that's a bonus. So it's just to add that in terms of what Sven has also mentioned.
And then the last piece, sorry, Paul, is you mentioned the importance of mentors, and you can get great mentor support through the local enterprise offices. But as it happens, just today we launched a new SME specific mentor scheme together with CBRE Ireland, and the scheme came from back in the day when the OECD was here last year, when the OECD looked at why are small businesses less productive than multinationals. And we looked at 4 different areas. We looked at HR and general management skills. We looked at the digital skills that small businesses have. We looked at financial skills and also operational excellence. So, and we, in the context of COVID, put this into a mentor context. So with what we're launching today, Mentors Work, small businesses that apply for it through the mentorswork.ie website will get free mentor, but also training, free training modules, online training modules in the 4 areas I just mentioned. Free of charge, places are limited, so apply for it now. But what's really important is that mentors take small businesses by their hands and help them with financial planning aspect, with pivoting digitally, and also look at the HR aspect of COVID. And what's also we bring new to the table through technology, then the peer-to-peer aspect of learning. And because small businesses are time poor, all of what we offer is online, and they can avail of it at the time that suits them.
That sounds absolutely fantastic, Sven. I'm sure people sign up. That's Mentors Work.
Mentorswork.ie.
So, we're now coming towards the end. I thought we were going to get an "oh" from our camera crew, but unfortunately not. So again, for people who are watching, you might get on the keyboards again, A for yes and B for no here. Might start with Marie.
Okay.
Is now a good time to start a business in Ireland?
I think it is. I think if it was me, I'd be nervous in the current climate, but I think that there's huge entrepreneurial spirit in Ireland, and the amount of companies and people that we've spoken to that have been able to pivot very, very quickly and embrace the situation we're in and find opportunities in it. And absolutely, I think it is. It's definitely a good time, but it's not for the faint-hearted.
It is a perfect time, and if you go through the papers, they're full of examples of new businesses that have started in times of COVID. Yesterday, there was in the Irish Times an article about a new retail business, online and retail, that are specialised in selling PPE equipment, for argument's sake. Today, I spoke to a new business they only started 2 months ago, where they offer market research solutions online through technology, making this research more affordable. And if you say with all the support that's out there, with probably deals to be had on the property market, if you require premises, now is a good time.
Yeah. The short answer is yes, and actually I think I go beyond that. I'd say it's absolutely critical that we encourage entrepreneurs and entrepreneurship. From our perspective, entrepreneurships and startups are the lifeblood of our enterprise base, and particularly you mentioned at the very start, Paul, about the regional importance of it. There is no more important area than entrepreneurship at a regional level. So we need to again encourage, support budding entrepreneurs are to get the message out that again there are supports available, and whether it's you have start-up grants that are available to your local enterprise office. There's the New Frontiers program, which is available through the Institute of Technology and ourselves, which provides that I suppose forum, if you like, for entrepreneurs to work with other entrepreneurs, get insight and experience from people who've gone down the journey already. But like if we're not encouraging entrepreneurship, then we've a real problem. So I think we need to consistently get that message across. It is a good time to start a business. Of course, there are challenges. Of course, there are barriers, as there always have been to startups and will be. But there's lots of supports available again for people to overcome them. So.
Yeah, and it's also a great time with technology, I think, to maybe find someone who you could start a business with, and through different ways of technology or your different passions. And I think, you all were spot on. It's always a good time, I think, to set up a business. But I tried to do that before. It's a tough road, but I admire everybody who does it. They have incredible creativeness, ambition, and ability, and we need to support that, and I know we do here in this country. So we've got just some Q&A questions coming in here. I might start with Marie. What's your thoughts on supply and demand variables that we should take comfort from, and what do you think will happen to office rents in the cycle? And you may have touched on that earlier in our first question.
Yeah, well, the two are really related, because if anything happens to rents, it's not going to be because of COVID, it's going to be because of the supply-demand balance. And that's one way we're radically different to last time. So yes, if you look down to the Docklands and count all the cranes, you're going to see a lot of development underway. But in reality, most of those schemes are already pre-let, so it's not going to be publicly available. And that's one of the lessons we learned from the last crash, that we build almost to order now. There's very limited speculative stock, and for that reason, rents may soften, but we're probably talking the magnitude of a 10% peak to trough fall, nothing like the 50% that we saw in 2007, 2008. So yes, rents will suffer to some degree, but nothing like before, and it's because we've got that supply-demand piece right. And demand is holding up quite well. There have been some companies that have put requirements on hold for the time being, but the overall level of demand is still higher than annual average take-up. So as long as it stays that way, that's a good place to be.
That's great to hear. Sven, just in terms of I guess we've spoken about supports and being very comprehensive what's came out from the government. Is there any additional supports or supports you've seen in maybe other countries that you think we should be looking at here in Ireland?
So I think there's two sides. So obviously we need to really look closely how the situation is evolving, how the winter months are going to pass by, and we just really need to look at the balance sheet damage that COVID is going to have, especially on small businesses. And we would probably need to look at something like not only revenue warehousing, but also at debt forgiveness for certain businesses of revenue and general state debt forgiveness. Like we probably need to extend the commercial rates waiver, which is coming to an end in September. So we really need to look at that. But for any new supports, it's really important to look at the scale, so that it really matters, to really focus on where it really can make the biggest impact. And also looking internationally, it's the ease of access to those. So that was the strength of the temporary wage subsidy scheme. It was nearly instantly that businesses got access to cash or got their money back. And we really need to look at, when we look at the new schemes, that the access and the speed is there, that small businesses can actually get the support that they need.
And just after getting one for yourself, Mark, here, this person was looking at the Enterprise Ireland website, and I've seen that you're promoting the area of female entrepreneurship and encouraging more women into business. What are you trying to achieve in this area?
Yeah, it's been a kind of a priority area of focus for us for the last number of years, Paul, that we're trying to encourage more female-led startups and high potential startup companies, and we've had a lot of success in that area, but there's more that we would like to achieve. And the Women in Business Action Plan that we launched earlier on this year had a range of actions to try and encourage that. And it was really around, it's really about maximizing the talent that's available in our workforce. It's about encouraging more women into business and into leadership roles, but also into starting up companies. So with 24 different areas that we were keen to focus on, 24 different actions to achieve those goals. And it's something, as I said, we've given a lot of attention to, and we don't want to lose that focus. I think coming out of this crisis, I think we're all gonna I suppose recognize the need that all of the talent that's available and in our society needs to be utilized as much as we possibly can, particularly in business. And we'd like definitely to see more women-led startup companies and more women in leadership positions.
I think that's where your mentoring comes in, because the women in general tend to be less confident in their own ability some of the time. So I think mentorship and that are connected. And,
absolutely, yeah, absolutely. And again, there are supports around that, and we have some really great examples of companies who have been led by very successful female entrepreneurs, and it's about instilling that confidence not just in women, but generally across our potential workforce. So yeah, absolutely.
So I think that brings us to an end. I'd like to thank my panel here today, Mark, Sven and Marie, for all the insights they've shared. It's been a very interesting panel, and I hope that you, the listener, enjoyed it. I'd like to say keep an eye out for upcoming future work webinars with Iconic offices as they explore topics such as Brexit in the coming weeks. Also, having a look on the YouTube channel last night, I'd highly recommend some of the personal development videos. And if you're not into that, there's one about how to make cocktails. So there's something there for everyone. So stay safe, farewell. Thank you.